raise your hand real high if you are excited about Christmas morning, or if you tend to get excited about Christmas morning. Come on, real high. I know there's more than 4 of you. Okay, yeah, real high, Christmas morning. All right, so for me, Christmas morning was a huge deal. Huge deal. Most exciting part about Christmas by far. And so because of that, I don't sleep well to begin with, but because of that, Christmas Eve is a challenge to go to sleep. I used to have all these strategies, all these like clever ways of trying to figure out how to fall asleep. Like sometimes on the 24th, I would wake up super early just so I'd be really tired when it was time to go to bed. Never worked. One year, this is good, you could try this. One year I took toothpaste and I put it under my eyes because it makes your eyes burn. And so I figured if I kept my eyes closed, I'd fall asleep. Didn't work. So don't try it. But eventually what happened is I'd fall asleep. Eventually, at some point after tossing and turning for hours because I was so excited. And then it was Christmas morning. Now, I grew up in a house, there's 3 of us. My sister, her name's Danielle, she's the oldest one. Then it was me in the middle child, struggles. And then my brother, he's 5 years younger, his name's Nick. So we all, like every year, we all had kind of like different roles in Christmas morning, how it unfolded. And they changed and morphed, but for the most part, what would happen is I'd be in bed and I'd be tired because I didn't go to sleep until some crazy hour in the night. And my sister would come running into my room. Like the door would fly open. She'd jump on my bed. She'd grab me. She'd get like real close, like in my face. Like you could smell the morning breath, you know? Like just all up, like, come on, it's Christmas morning. So excited. And then I'd realize, I'd be like, oh, it's Christmas morning. I'd jump out of bed. Then we'd go into my brother's room. And I don't know why, but like for a few years, it was like he just didn't get it. You know, like he'd forget all of what Christmas morning was. And so we'd run into his room and be like, Nick, get up. And he just like wouldn't really want to get out of bed. Be like, come on. It was almost like he was convinced there was nothing special waiting for him under the tree. And so eventually we'd yank him out of bed. And then we had a rule anyway. We had to wait until 7 a.m. before we could go into my parents' room. So we would, right? We'd get there 7 a.m. and then we'd go downstairs and it's just magical. You know, there's some cookies, they've been eaten, there are presents under the tree. It's just super exciting. The highlight of my year, almost every year, Christmas morning, super exciting, amazing. And as a kid, you know, I'd step back and be like, all right, well, who's responsible for this? It's Santa Claus. And Santa is just the man, right? He wears the same outfit every year. No one gives him a problem for it. He drinks Coke, right? He eats more cookies than anyone you'll ever meet. And he just comes around giving out toys. He's got reindeer. He doesn't even use a car. He's a giver. He's generous. You know, there was that like one thing about the coal, which was a little sketchy. You know, apparently bad kids get coal. But I went to school, plenty of bad kids, and none of them ever seemed to get coal. So I figured I was in the clear for the most part. There's nothing bad about him. He's the man, Santa. Awesome. But for me, there's a stark contrast between the excitement of Christmas morning and everything else I felt late on Christmas Eve. We'd go to my cousin's house or they'd come to our place and we'd have some time. We'd eat, we'd tell some stories, go down in the basement, play Nintendo 64 for a little while, and then all of a sudden everything would come to a screeching halt. Our parents would yell down into the basement, be like, time to come upstairs. It's time for church. And this for me was like the tax you have to pay for having so much fun on Christmas morning. All the fun comes to a stop. I'm all dressed up, you know, and I didn't really like getting dressed up as a kid. And I had to go to church. And I'd sit in church, and it wasn't really my thing. You know, I just didn't understand what was going on. Someone up there, I'm supposed to like listen to him speak, just waiting for him to finish. Sometimes they'd give me a candle and I'd just pick at the wax the whole time. But it was just something that we put up with because with Christmas, you kind of like take the good with the bad. You know, Like you do that part, you get through that because it's the right thing to do. You're supposed to. My parents wanted us to. Their parents would. It's part of what we believe, who we are, and so we do it. And if I were to step back, honestly, and be like, all right, well, who's responsible for this part of Christmas? It was Jesus, God. And so in my little mind, which is still pretty small, there was like this rivalry, like the battle of the Christmas heroes, like Santa and Jesus. And one was a giver. One was the reason why I was so excited. One ate cookies and was the reason for presents. One, I couldn't wait. I loved the songs we sang about him. Couldn't wait for him to come to my house. It was just awesome. And then the other one, there was this sense of loyalty to because we were supposed to. You do it because it's the right thing to do. It's part of who we are. It's part of, but really, if I were to narrow it down, get to the core, and though I would have never articulated it this way as a kid, what I believed was that Santa wanted something for me, and God wanted something from me. Santa was a giver, and God was a taker. What's really interesting is that if you look at the way the Jesus part of the Christmas story is explained, one of the first times anyone ever tries to explain what it means for the world that Jesus has been born. Here's how it's described. And here's something that caught me off guard. And maybe for you, you've heard these words before because you've just heard them before. Maybe you got a Christmas card in the mailbox and it said these words on the bottom of them. Maybe you heard it in a song. But this is how the Jesus part of Christmas was described. You ready? Good. There's some angels that interrupt these shepherds who are taking care of their sheep in the middle of the night. They show up and they say, I bring you, ready? Good news that will cause, great joy for all the people. Good news, great joy, all the people. Now, maybe you've heard this before, and it's amazing how words can lose their impact. They can lose their meaning just because we become so familiar with them. But you've heard that before. Oh, that's right. That's the part that angels say to the shepherds, right? Good news of great joy for all people. But what's being said here is that there is a message that is so good. It's not just good news. It's not just going to make people a little happy. It's news that will bring great joy for everyone. It's like with the tone of my sister, right, barging into my bedroom on Christmas morning and be like, it's Christmas. She's got good news, and she knows I'm gonna love it when I hear it. Good news of great joy for all people. This is how it's described. And the message is that Jesus has come. There's a reference to Bethlehem, the town of David. But it just in its simplest form, they're like, you ready? This whole Jesus part, it's good news of great joy for all people. And so for me, I don't know. Maybe you're like me, and I just can't take when things don't make sense. Right? If I see a contradiction, I have to stop and be like, hold on, what I'm hearing doesn't line up with what I'm seeing. Because for me, and maybe you can relate to this a little bit, for a long time, the Jesus part was not something that brought me great joy. It was something that I put up with. The Jesus part, not just of Christmas, but the Jesus part, whatever part that was of my life, It was just the thing that we did because we were supposed to. And maybe you know that feeling. Like maybe there's a Jesus part in your life. Maybe it's really small. Maybe it's like, you're Italian and you also happen to believe in Jesus. Maybe it's big. But for me, it was not a source of great joy. And it's amazing how we can just look at something and see like a contradiction right in front of us and just breeze over it. It's like if you get a coffee pot and it says, turn this on, hot water will come out, but cold water comes out, you'd be like, hold on a second. And so for you, the question is really, does this bring great joy? Great joy or not? Not just the Christmas part, but the Jesus part in like your life. For me, what I eventually came to understand, you probably can connect the dots. Eventually I started to get into this stuff, right? For me, what I realized was that my view of God, like my understanding of God was like that he was this power-hungry source of all the rules that was just like watching and waiting for me to say the wrong thing, to slip up again. He was the code of right and wrong. The judge that was like waiting to drop the hammer. And so the Jesus part, for me, was just rules. Rules and regulations. The cosmic hall monitor with the clipboard that's got all the to-dos for me to do and all the to-don'ts for me to don't. And it ended there. And the idea was that if I do my part, then God will do his part. Right? If I like do the right thing to the best of my ability, like for the most part, kind of try to do the right thing, then maybe I'll end up being like on God's, right side. And at the end of the day, if there's anything to all of this, like maybe things will work out in my favor. And so I do this and hope he does that. And you know what we call that? You know what kind of relationship that is? That's a transactional relationship. And you know what I can tell you about a transactional relationship? When you fulfill your part so they fulfill their part, there is never any joy in a transactional relationship. Right? Like think about it. If you have a mortgage, there is a lender that gave you a lot of money and you're giving them back a lot of money, more even over time. But the two of you don't have some kind of like joyful, intimate connection. You're not eating dinner with them tomorrow night. But it's a transactional relationship. Transactional, contractual. No joy in that relationship. Jesus showed up. Like he stepped into a culture that understood God in this transactional way. We just do what he says so he doesn't like squish us. So he doesn't get angry with us. We keep our end of the bargain. He keeps his end of the bargain. And he just turned this whole idea upside down. He took it from an understanding of God that was transactional and introduced these people to a way of understanding God that was relational. When Jesus addressed God, he referred to him almost exclusively as Father. In the ancient language, it was an intimate term for father, not like a formal version of father. He saw himself as part of a family, and he invited other people to do the same thing. In fact, John, who was one of Jesus' close friends, said it this way. He said, yet to all who received him, who accepted him, who said, okay, cool, I'm with you, I believe what you say. To all who received him, who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, that he was who he said he was. John says he gave the right, the authority, the position, the ability to become children. Children, not servants, not employees, but children of God, like born into a family. And a family, a place in the family, that's something you rest in. And you know what else I can tell you? Your greatest source of joy in your life is always going to be found in relationships. Always. those are going to be your greatest sources of joy. And the minute you begin to understand God in a relational way, the door for joy opens back up. But as long as it remains transactional, there's no room for joy. You know, when we think of God, we think of like, okay, right and wrong. And yeah, sure, maybe in church there's a lot of talk about forgiveness and Jesus dying on the cross. And so maybe I just got to say I'm sorry enough. And how does that work out? There's somebody who came after Jesus who was one of his followers. He said, think of it this way. For me, this is the thing that like makes it click. He says, if there's like a list, in essence, of like all your debts, like all the things, your transgressions, your sins, your wrongs, like the list where it all goes up. When Jesus died on the cross, right? The cross a lot of us had tattooed on our arms and around our neck, that whole idea. When he died on the cross, imagine he took the record of your debt and nailed it up there with him, like gone, out the window. Because in a family, that's not how we relate with one another, right? There's not this scorekeeping, rule keeping, making sure you don't step out of line, or at least there shouldn't be. Not to the point that it determines whether or not you're in the family, right? And so the door for joy opens back up. My kids, 6 and 8, Mia and Logan, they like really conveniently just had this 24-hour virus yesterday. Great, perfect timing. And my wife was here, she was getting things ready for church, you know, and so I stayed home and took care of the kids, and it was just nuts. Like, I mean, they're not feeling great, they're, you know, like getting sick, and I'm just walking around with like buckets and Clorox and Lysol and masks, and my mom was bringing like grape juice and chicken soup and whatever, just trying to like get this thing out. All the windows are open, right? And there are different points where they're like asking for help, they're calling me, they're whatever. But you know what I can tell you? Like there was never a point where I would have left them or could have left them. There was never a point where they would have wanted me to leave. And I don't think through the struggle they were going through, there was ever a point where they were questioning if they were like doing the right thing and if they were making their dad happy. And if they were obeying the rules and checking the boxes. Because our relationship is not transactional. They don't see me in that way. I'm not super dad, but my kids are comfortable enough to know they don't have to perform for me to earn my affection. And just the presence of me being there, even though I couldn't take away what they were going through, just my presence there was a comfort to them. And that's how God wants us to understand him, in that way. There may be a difficulty you're going through that doesn't go away. And if you're sitting there wondering, like, is God gonna help? Well, did I say my prayers? Did I make it to church? Am I doing this? That will totally suck the relationship, the relational aspect out of the relationship. But what if we found his presence as simply a source of comfort because we're part of his family, because we've been given the right to be called his children. So my question for you, I'm going to call the band up here, we'll wrap it up. My question for you is, when you think of God, however into it you are or not, do you understand him in a way that is primarily transactional? You got to do what you got to do, and if you don't, well, you're out. Or relational. Part of a family. Family you can't get yourself out of. Care you can't push away. The heart of the Christmas story is that Jesus showed up to show us and explain to us that the version of God that's transactional, that's a taker, who wants something from you, not for you, he doesn't exist. Jesus wanted people to know that there's a God who invites you to call him Father, who wants something for you, who's a giver, gave everything and would give everything for you. And so this Christmas, if you're somebody who's been in church for a long time, and your understanding of God, your relationship with God is lacking joy, this might be it. Maybe you're looking at the transactional aspect, the do's and the don'ts. But if you're someone who's kept God at an arm's length, you just don't want to be part of that, what if it's real? What if this is true? What if there's really something to this? And what if it's better than you thought it was? Like God really is a giver who wants something for you, not from you. What if it's real? What if, like my brother, you're holding God at an arm's length because you're convinced that there's nothing special waiting for you under the tree? What if it really is good news of great joy, not just for all people, but for you and for me?